I used to live in a quiet, older apartment building in upstate New York, the kind that looks charming on the outside but creaks and groans like a haunted house once you step inside. I was a grad student back then, working 2 jobs and spending most of my time buried in books or glued to my laptop. The building was mostly filled with older tenants, single folks or people who kept to themselves. I lived on the 2nd floor, in Unit 2B. The unit directly above me, 3C, had been empty since I moved in. I knew because the landlord mentioned it when I first signed the lease, said the previous tenant left in a hurry and hadn't come back for their things. That should have been a red flag. But I was broke and the rent was cheap. Too cheap for the first few months. It was perfect, quiet, private, no issues until mid-November. It started with footsteps. I remember the first night vividly, a Wednesday. I had just finished a late shift and was winding down with a glass of wine when I heard clear, heavy footsteps directly above me. Slow and deliberate. Heel to toe like someone pacing. I figured someone had finally moved in. The next day, I asked the landlord, Mrs. Delaney, an older woman who lived on site. She looked confused when I asked about it. "No one's moved into 3C, she said. "Still vacant." "Why?" I told her what I'd heard and she brushed it off. "Probably the pipes. These old buildings make all kinds of noises in the winter." I didn't press the issue, but the sounds didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. By the end of that week, I was hearing dragging noises, furniture scraping against the floor, even what sounded like someone dropping heavy objects. Always at night, always between 2 and 4 a.m. One night, I was so fed up I grabbed a broom and pounded the ceiling a few times. The noises stopped instantly, but 5 minutes later, 3 knocks echoed from the ceiling. Deliberate, measured, directly above where I'd hit. It felt like a response. That's when I started to get nervous. I recorded some of the sounds with my phone, played them back for a few friends, but the audio was never quite right. Muffled, indistinct, like the noises didn't want to be captured. I went back to Mrs. Delaney, told her something was off. She finally agreed to let me check out 3C with her. We went up the next day. She unlocked the door, and immediately I felt a blast of cold air, even though the heat was on in the hallway. The apartment was dusty, abandoned, but not untouched. Furniture was still there, a small couch, a table, a couple chairs. Everything covered in a thin layer of grime, like it had been sitting for years. On the floor near the window, I saw a single child's shoe. Mrs. Delaney said nothing about it, just stood quietly while I looked around. "Do you want me to lock it up again?" she asked as we stepped out. Her voice sounded tight, like she didn't want to be there. I nodded. That night, the noises started again. Only this time, there was something else. Voices. At first, it was just murmuring, low, indistinct, like 2 people having a hushed argument behind a wall. I pressed my ear to the ceiling. Nothing. But when I laid back down in bed, I could hear it again. Closer, a woman's voice. Then a child's. I couldn't make out the words, but there was a rhythm to it. The woman would speak. Softly, almost. Pleading. And then there'd be silence. Then the child would giggle, not a happy giggle though. It sounded wrong, cold. By now I was sleeping with the lights on. The worst moment came 2 nights later. I was jolted awake at 3:17 a.m. by a loud bang directly above me, like a chair had been thrown. My heart was racing. I sat up, adrenaline surging. That's when I heard footsteps again. But this time, they didn't stay above me. They moved. I tracked them as they went across the ceiling, down the hallway, and then I heard them on the stairs, coming down, slow, steady, one step at a time. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911. But before I hit call, the footsteps stopped, right outside my apartment door. I didn't breathe. Then knock, knock, knock. I stared at the door. No peephole, no sound, just silence. And then the doorknob jiggled. I backed away. Phone clutched in my hand, still not dialing. I don't know why. A few seconds passed. Then I heard it, a whisper from the other side of the door. Let me in. That was enough. I finally hit call. The cops arrived about 10 minutes later. By the time they got there, the hallway was empty. No signs of forced entry, nothing unusual. I told them everything. They did a walk-through, checked 3C, still locked, still abandoned. But when we went back downstairs, one of the officers stopped. Did you notice this? He asked, pointing at my doorframe. There were deep scratch marks, like someone had been clawing at the wood with long nails. 4 long lines dragged from top to bottom. I moved out the next morning. I broke my lease, forfeited the deposit, packed what I could fit in my car, and crashed on a friend's couch for a month. Mrs. Delaney didn't argue. She just handed me the final paperwork and said, "You're not the first, you know. Everyone who's lived under 3C eventually leaves." I asked her why she kept it vacant. She just shook her head. "That apartment, it doesn't want anyone else. It's been a year now. I still have dreams about that building. Sometimes I see the child in the window. Sometimes I hear the voice, always the same whisper. Let me in." I live in a quiet suburb in Ohio. Not one of those fancy gated communities, just a regular middle-class neighborhood. It's the kind of place where people still say good morning when they pass you, where the ice cream truck comes around in the summer, and where neighbors actually borrow sugar from each other. I moved here 5 years ago after transferring for work. It seemed like the right move. I found a modest 2-bedroom home on a corner lot. Nothing special, but it had a decent yard and a little wooden shed tucked into the back corner, half covered by overgrown shrubs. The previous owner left it behind, said it had been there since the 70s and was too much trouble to tear down. For years, I barely paid attention to it. It held my lawnmower, a couple old rakes, leftover paint cans, the usual. I never had a reason to go out there at night. But last summer, something changed. And ever since, I can't look at that shed or this house the same way again. Started on a Tuesday. I'd had a rough day at work. Back-to-back meetings, barely any time to breathe. I crashed on the couch with a basketball game on. Next thing I knew, it was 2:30 in the morning. The TV was still on, casting a flickering light across the room. The air felt cold. I realized I'd left the back door open to let the breeze in earlier that evening. Groggy, I stood up to shut it, but something made me glance out the kitchen. Window. The motion light above the shed had turned on, and right at the edge of the glow, maybe 25 feet from the house, was a figure. Someone was standing next to the shed, not moving. Just there. At first, I thought it had to be a shadow, or maybe a trick of my tired eyes, but then they shifted slightly. It was definitely a person, standing dead still, facing the house. A spike of adrenaline hit me. I turned off the kitchen light, backed away, and went straight to my closet for the old aluminum baseball bat I kept for emergencies. I didn't call the cops, not yet. A part of me thought maybe it was a teenager messing around, or someone drunk who wandered into the wrong yard. But when I returned to the window, they were gone. The next morning, I went outside to check. The grass was still damp with dew, and, sure enough, clear footprints led from the far side of the shed to directly below the kitchen window, then back again. No other houses on this block, back up to woods. There's nowhere to come from or disappear into, except the street or someone's yard. Still, I convinced myself it was just a one-off, but it wasn't. 3 nights later, a Friday, I was brushing my teeth when I heard it. A soft thud, like someone dropped something heavy on the grass. It came from the backyard. I turned off the bathroom light and peeked through the blinds. The shed door was open. I hadn't touched it in weeks. I stared at it for probably 2 minutes, trying to see if anyone was inside. But it was too dark. I finally worked up the nerve, grabbed the bat, and walked out there with a flashlight. The shed smelled like dust and old paint. Everything looked untouched. No sign of forced entry. No one hiding inside. I locked it with a padlock that night. One of those thick master ones. The next morning, the door was hanging open again. The padlock was in the grass, snapped clean in half. That's when I knew this wasn't just a random person. Whoever it was, or whatever it was, wanted inside that shed. Or maybe they wanted me to open it. Over the next week, things got worse. I'd hear soft footsteps in the yard around 2 or 3 a.m. The dog next door barked almost every night now, growling toward my backyard. I even started hearing breathing, sometimes soft, steady, when I lay in bed with the window cracked. And then, one night, I heard tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the guest bedroom. I walked down the hallway slowly, gripping the bat like it was the only thing keeping me alive. The door creaked as I opened it. The window was wide open, and resting neatly on the sill was a note, folded, yellowed, and damp around the edges. One sentence, in shaky handwriting. You shouldn't have locked the shed. That's when I called the police. They showed up about 15 minutes later. 2 officers swept the yard, checked the shed, took the note for evidence. I asked if they'd patrol the neighborhood that night. They said they would, but they didn't sound convinced I wasn't just spooked by my own imagination. That night, I sat in the living room with every light on, gripping the bat like a lifeline. At exactly 3:33 a.m., I heard it. The shed door slammed. Rushed to the window. There was someone, tall, thin, face completely obscured, crouched in front of the shed, fiddling with something in their hands. I called the cops again, told them someone was trying to break into my property. While I was on the phone, the figure slowly stood up and looked right at me. Even from across the yard, I could feel it. The weight of its stare. Then it smiled, wide, unnatural. I swear its mouth stretched too far and the teeth too many, too white. I backed away. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, they found the shed open again. This time, inside, scrawled in black marker on the back wall, were 3 words. Let me in. I packed a bag, laptop, wallet. Left that night. Stayed with a friend 2 towns over. The next day, I scheduled a full security system install. Cameras, motion lights, reinforced locks. When I returned a week later, it didn't feel like home anymore. The air felt thick, almost damp, off. The cameras caught almost nothing for weeks. A few branches swaying, a raccoon now and then. Then a month later, I got a ping. Motion detected. Backyard. 3:02 a.m. I pulled up the feed. And there it was, standing, perfectly still at the far edge of the yard, just watching. I stared for nearly a minute, then clicked rewind to save the footage. Error. File corrupted. Every angle, every camera, just static. That was the final straw. I sold the house 2 months.
Later, I didn't go back for the final walkthrough.
Didn't check the shed. I don't want to know who or what was inside it. All I know is, sometimes now, even in this new neighborhood, when I pass a yard with a small wooden shed in the corner, I get that feeling again, like something's still waiting, watching. I want to start this off by saying I'm not someone who believes in the supernatural. Ghost stories, I've always seen them as campfire entertainment, cryptids, demons, whatever. I never gave that stuff a second thought. But what happened? To me was real. I still don't have an explanation for it. And I honestly don't care if anyone believes me. This is just what happened. It was the first weekend of October last year, and my parents had asked me to house sit while they went to visit my sister in Vermont. They live in an old farmhouse in a rural part of Pennsylvania, just outside a small town called Millville. Their nearest neighbor is about a 10-minute walk down a gravel road, and the rest is just dense forest. It's the kind of place you either love for the solitude or hate because of how isolated it feels. I've stayed there alone dozens of times and never had a problem.
I actually like it. There's something calming about being away from everything. No traffic, no people, just you and nature. The first night, I got there around 6 p.m. I fed the dog, made myself a sandwich, and spent the evening flipping
through movies. By midnight, I was ready to crash. Their bedroom is upstairs, overlooking the backyard with a big double window that faces the woods. I always crack it open a bit to let some fresh air in. That night was cool, but not cold, and the wind made the leaves outside sound like soft waves. I left the bedroom door slightly ajar
and fell asleep almost instantly. I woke up suddenly at around 3 a.m. No dream, no noise, just that feeling, like your body knows something's off before your brain does. I was lying on my side, facing the window, and it was too quiet. No wind, no insects, not even the distant barking of coyotes that are usually around this time of year. Just dead. Silence, and then I realized I wasn't alone. You know that feeling when someone's watching you?
Not just paranoia, something deeper, instinctual. I held my breath. My eyes adjusted to the moonlit room, and that's when I saw it. There was a silhouette at the window. Not a shadow, not a trick of light, a solid, unmistakable human
figure. It was standing maybe 2 feet away from the glass. Too tall to be a kid. Just standing there, completely still. At first, I couldn't make out any details,
but I could feel it looking in, like its entire attention was locked on me. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I was afraid that if I shifted or made a sound, it would do something. I don't know what. I didn't want to find out. Then, as if it knew I was awake, it leaned forward slightly. I saw the faint glint of eyes. Just eyes, catching a bit of moonlight. Watching. I snapped out of it and lunged forward to slam the window shut and yank the curtain across. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it would explode. I stood there frozen, listening for footsteps outside, for the sound of retreating leaves, but nothing. After about 10 minutes of dead silence, I turned on every light in the house and grabbed the dog, who had been downstairs asleep the entire time and hadn't made a sound. That part really bothered me. My parents' dog is a lab mix, big and usually alert. He barks at deer, cars,
even falling leaves, but that night, he didn't make a single sound. He didn't even seem interested in the window. He just sat there next to me, looking away.
Almost like he knew not to go near it. The next morning, I went outside to check the backyard. I didn't expect to see anything, and for the most part, there was nothing, except for one thing. Right below my window in the patch of grass was a perfectly clear indentation, like someone had been standing there for a long time. Just standing and staring. That was the first night. The second night, I locked everything, every door, every window. I even wedged a chair under the handle of the front door, like some cliché out of a horror movie. I didn't care. I wasn't taking chances. I stayed up watching TV until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. The dog stayed close to me, which wasn't typical. He usually sleeps near the back door. Around at 1 a.m. I went upstairs. I didn't open the window. I didn't even turn off the lamp. At 3:24 a.m. I woke up again, but this time it wasn't instinct, it was a noise. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, knock, knock, knock. I knew exactly where it came from, the window. My
skin went cold. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on my chest. I couldn't bring myself to move. Then, after about 10 seconds of silence, I heard it. A whisper. Chris. It wasn't loud, it wasn't menacing, but it was wrong. There was no reason anyone should have known my name. And it wasn't a voice I recognized. I didn't turn toward the window. I reached over, grabbed
my phone with shaking hands, and called 911. I whispered that someone was outside the house, possibly trying to break in. Cops showed up 20 minutes later. By then, of course, the figure was gone. No footprints again. They checked the perimeter, asked me some questions, then told me to stay alert and call back if it happened again. They thought I was imagining it. I could tell by their
tone, but I knew what I saw and I knew what I heard. That night, I slept downstairs with all the lights on.
And the dog at my feet. I didn't close my eyes once. The final night, I debated leaving. I had packed a bag and everything. I even sat in my car with the keys in the ignition. But something, pride, stupidity, I don't know, made me go back inside. I didn't want to let whatever this was scare me out of my own home. That was a mistake. I triple-checked all the locks again. Pushed a dresser in front of my bedroom door. I even slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow. I left the lamp on and laid there with my eyes closed, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. At some point, I drifted off. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., I heard the sound of my doorknob turning. Not rattling, not forced, just slowly, quietly turning, like someone was testing it, waiting. Then the door creaked open. I know I locked it. I know I blocked it with the dresser. But the door was opening. Inch by inch, I sat up, paralyzed. That's when I saw them. 2 hands, pale, unnaturally long fingers, gripping either side of the doorframe. They just waited there. No movement, no sound, just those hands curled around the wood, as if whatever they belonged to was just standing in the hall, watching. I fumbled for the knife, then flipped on the light, and the hands were gone. The door was wide open. The hallway was empty. The dresser was still against the door, unmoved. It didn't make sense. I searched the house, top to bottom, blade in hand, every light on. Nothing. No sign of entry, no broken locks, but the front door, wide open. That was it for me. I grabbed my stuff, the dog, and left. Drove all the way back to my apartment. Didn't even stop for gas. I didn't tell my parents the full story. Just that I got spooked by some noises. They didn't press me. It's been a year now. I haven't gone back since. And I don't plan to. I still don't know what I saw. If it was a person, they were playing a sick game. If it was something else, then I don't even want to begin to understand what it wanted. But sometimes, even now, I wake up in the middle of the night and I swear I hear breathing. Slow, deep, and steady right outside my window.